Sure.
So as a reminder, 5 secrets of genuine influence. That's what we're covering here if you're tuning in late. Let go of having to be right.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, this one's an interesting one because it kind of, how can you be influential if you're, you know, not always going to be right? Well, that's what helps you become influential. Because when you can let go of having to be right, that doesn't mean you're not wanting to be right, that you're not desiring to be right, that you're not going to prepare to be right. And of course you are. You're going to do your very best to be right. What it means is this: you're going to lose your emotional attachment to having to be right. When you do this, a couple of beautiful things happen. Okay. First, you put yourself in the position to be a learner. You actually put yourself in the position to learn more because you're not stuck on, you know, having to be right. You're allowing for the possibility that you may not be 100% right, or you may not be, you know, right about now this, as opposed to the person whose life philosophy seems to be, my mind's already made up. Don't confuse me with the facts. Right? That person can never know more than what they know right now. And typically the more someone is stuck on having to be right, Brad, the less they usually are right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that person who's willing to go into learner's mode creates that environment where they're more likely to actually be right. Here's the other part. When this other person realizes that you're not trying to be a know-it-all, that you're more of a, as my friend Dan Rockwell calls it, a learn-it-all, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're
like
not
that.
when you're not looking to just be right when you're not looking to be right by making them wrong,
Mm-hmm.
they now lower their defenses. They now understand that you're someone who your only goal is to seek the truth wherever that may lead. And when that's the case, now they're more likely to let go of having to be right and join you in the search for truth, again, wherever that may lead. So this is why great leaders and great influencers have lost their attachment to having to be right, and why they're so very effective and more trusted.
One of the things we say at Triad a lot is check your ego at the door.
Oh.
And it's so spot on with that last principle. It's, you know, coaching. I've been very fortunate. I've been able to coach some of the top independent financial advisors the last decade and a half that I've been in this industry. And a common theme, Bob, that you just hit on, the very best, regardless of how successful they are continue to be growth minded. They don't know it all. They haven't figured it all out. And that's why they continue to grow and excel and exceed, you know, something that they very few would think was possible just a few years later. I heard Microsoft, I think it's at Microsoft, and you can correct me, maybe you've heard this. One of the ways they do this, one of the frameworks they talk about is they have a saying that says, you are not your idea. And so they take this idea that people kind of commingle with their ego,
right,
and they just set the idea on the table.
I love it.
And then they can bat the idea around and, you know, argue the idea and have a bunch of really smart people refine the idea without taking personal offense if it's not exactly, you know, what they originally put out there. Have you heard, is that Microsoft?
I don't know. I hadn't heard that about Microsoft, but I love the idea. I know Ray Dalio talks about that in his book, Principles, which is a fantastic book. But I'll tell you another book I really recommend, and please excuse me for turning my back one moment. I know that's not.
You're good. You've got a few back there. It might take a second.
Adam Grant wrote a wonderful book a couple of years ago called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. And I really think that this book is one of the most important books of our times.
Think again.
Yeah.
Why is that? If you
Because
give me one reason why.
Yeah, sure. Because he goes through the entire, I would say in summary, the aspect of human nature that is so ego attached to having to be right that we really cannot see where we're wrong. Okay. This is where cognitive dissonance, this is where confirmation bias comes into play. And it's absolutely so counterproductive to our success as individuals and as a society. And he just, to me, not only outlines it, but provides so many just fantastic examples of how to really be able to check our premises and have those aha moments. But he also talks about how to be more persuasive. And some of that is by, again, letting go of having to be totally right and look for where that other person is also, has a point and is right, and taking it from there. But yeah, I just think this is an absolutely terrific book.